Talk to me a little bit about, your current role with First. What's your location look like? What are some of your responsibilities, duties, within your role?
Sure. So my role with First Student now is I'm the location manager in Batavia, Illinois. And when I first transitioned out of the military, this was my first job coming out, and came in here to a location that was failing, losing lots of money, and only had one contract, and the relationship with that customer was terrible.
Gotcha.
Uh, so I came in 1 year, started making that relationship a little bit better, enough to where we were able to win the bid for next year because they saw that there was a change, right?
Yeah.
Uh, in that next year, we worked on growing and through the pandemic, and we did that. Not only just growing internally, but we grew in customers too. So we went from one school district to three
Gotcha.
in one summer. So
Okay.
last year was our first year with three school districts. So we went from a really small location to a medium to large location in one summer. And that happened to be the hardest summer ever to hire drivers. So,
And,
it,
and so you mentioned this was your first role coming out of the military. How did you find out about First? How did you find the job? Was it a job
so
board or?
yeah, it was, man, it was rough. I had put in my papers for February 19th, 2020, right? It was my birthday. And I thought that'd be a great day to make it to where I'm leaving, right? I
Yeah.
had a job lined up to go overseas as a contractor working for Boeing.
Okay.
And, um, it just so happened late January, President Trump announced the withdrawal from Afghanistan, or
Yeah.
the beginning of the withdrawal. So Boeing started pulling their people out of there and filling their open positions and their open vacancies in Kuwait and other places. And so my job disappeared weeks before I was set to get out of the military.
Yes.
And so it just went away. And then COVID hit. So I spent 6 months of full time filling out applications.
Gotcha.
It was
Gotcha.
over 4,000 applications in 6 months that I filled
Goodness
out.
gracious. Oh,
And I got three callbacks in six
wow.
months.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
None of
so
those were first student. So they were jobs that I really didn't want. They were in sales and other things, and
yeah,
um, where they had advertised one thing and then said, "Oh, what we're really hiring for is something else." Yeah.
gotcha.
So that was what I got callbacks for, or people that were like, "We're going to do something, but it's not going to be until September or something like that," right? So
Yeah,
nothing that was actively going where I would get a job. And then
gotcha.
out of the blue, I got a call from my whole building shaking. Sorry. We
Oh,
have
you
equipment out in the lot that are tearing up the uh
gotcha.
anyway, so where was I at? Oh,
Getting a
got a
call.
call out of the blue from what's the name of the company we use to recruit?
Um, Lucas Group.
Lucas Group. Got a call from Lucas Group. They said, "Hey, we got a job for you." And I was like, "That's funny. I know every single job that exists, and
Yeah,
it's not that one." And I was just like, "Trust me. If as soon as a job pops up, I fill an application for it." And they were like, "No, it's not listed yet." I was
wow,
like, "Oh, okay." And so they called me, and they were like, "I think we'll think you'd be a great fit for it." And like 3 days later, I saw it pop up on the job boards, and
there you go.
he set up an interview for it. So, that was kind of the process, and Lucas Group brought me in,
Yeah,
and I got the job that way.
fantastic. Yeah, we work. They're an agency that we utilize. Excuse me. Of course, we have our internal recruiting team that I'm part of, but they're definitely a force multiplier for us in terms of specifically reaching that military community that prior to the creation of my role we hadn't really focused on. There wasn't a recruiter who was targeting transitioning personnel, reserve personnel for leadership roles within our company. So we utilize Lucas Group heavily because they are experts in that field for sure. You mentioned coming into, when you came into the location, it was struggling. There were issues. I assume those range for everything from operational to personnel to conflicts that were ongoing that you were now walking into. Would you say, or I guess at what level would you say that your military experience played into your ability to jump into this not best of environments as far as business goes, and turn it around and actually grow it and become successful at the location?
So, coming out of the military, there are pluses and minuses to that.
Yeah.
You have civilians that have never worked with somebody from the military, and so there was a lot of apprehension from the current employees. Like, oh God, this guy's gonna be a complete
Drill
ass, or
sergeant. Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
he's gonna come in, he's gonna be a jerk, and we're not gonna blah blah blah. And, but I really didn't fit in the army because I was not like that in the army.
Right.
It was I really bought into their style of leadership, and so it was what they teach in school type leadership, not what actually people did. So
Yeah. Yep.
it was it was education for them to where not everybody's the same, right? And then I
Yeah.
come in and we're as an AGR, I've worked with civilians because let's face it, in the reserves and National Guard, you're dealing with civilians that are doing military duty on the weekend, right? But they're
100%.
for the most part civilians, so that's who I mainly worked with for the last decade.
Gotcha.
It's a completely different mindset.
Yeah.
And so I came in there, and a lot of people were apprehensive about having a guy from the military come in, and really had some negative views towards me, as I was coming in, but got over that really quickly.
Yeah.
But even more so, it was the negative views about how things have been in the past,
Right.
and we were able to take that, turn it around, and say, hey, listen, I can't fix what happened in the past, but this is what we're going to do going forward. And I laid out a plan, a vision for them, just like any commander would do as they're coming in and taking over a new company, like this is my vision, this is where I want us to go, and we just went from there.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah, I think that's a common misconception. And I see it in recruiting a lot, whether it's working with hiring managers or even just in the civilian world in general. There's this mindset of what someone in the military is. It's what you see on TV, the whatever it might be, the special forces, blowing up doors, kicking in doors, doing all that, or the drill sergeant, the robot. But in reality, that was not my experience. It sounds like it wasn't. I mean, especially in the reserves and National Guard, not to say you see that more on active duty, but I spent 13 and a half years in the National Guard, for those as a recruiting retention NCO. And I think, like you said, there's civilians 28, 29 days out of the year typically, or out of the month, I'm sorry, typically. And then they come in, they put the uniform on, and they're able to adapt to the military culture. But the majority of their time is spent in the civilian world. I think basic training and the initial training kind of instills the core values in you that teach that military lifestyle and that mentality. Of course, not everyone adapts to that, but yeah. So I think that, getting over that hurdle is a big issue for military personnel transition into the civilian world. And part of that is on the the soldier, the airman, the marine, whatever it is, to realize that they are coming into a less structured environment. It's not, your career path may not be laid out from E1 to E9. There's not just set steps that you go along and you succeed in the civilian world. So there's kind of it's just two communities that haven't completely gotten over that gap of culture and whatnot. And I think the better you're able to do that, coming from the military into the civilian world and realizing that you're entering a new organization, community, culture as a whole, the better transition you'll have. So jumping back to, let's go all the way back early military. What MOS did you enlist into? Talk to me a little bit about your enlistment experience. We all have great recruiter stories, I feel like, whether you got lied to or whatever it is, or lied to, I should say. Just talk to me a little bit about that enlistment experience.
Yeah, so I was in college, and I found out that college is really expensive. My parents weren't paying for it. I was the first person in my family to ever go to college.
Gotcha.
And so they'd never saved for college because they've never had the need to,
Right.
right?
Right.
So everything I had to do, I had to pay for myself, and went through. And I was like, okay, I'll just work a job while I'm doing this. And I did that in high school. I worked a full-time job as I was in high school,
Yeah.
and still kept decent grades and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
then you get to college and think I can still do this, right? And then you're throwing in, hey, I live on my own. I want to do this, join a fraternity and go party, and and it just got to be too much. And I was just like, all right, I can't do all this and work and afford to stay in college and still get good grades. So I said, okay, well, recruiter cold called me
Okay.
and I answered, and he was like, "You want to just sit down for a conversation?" And I was like, "Yeah, all right, good conversation."
Yeah.
And it was over a cup of coffee or something.
Hmm.
We sit there and talked, and I told him what I wanted, and I was like, "Well, I'm, in college, to become, police officer." And he was like, "Well, you can do that here too." And I was like, "Okay." Well, I went through and signed up to go be a 95 Bravo, which is what it was back then, which is now 31 Bravo.
Gotcha.
Uh, and so I signed up and did a year in the reserves as a 95 Bravo and hated every second of it.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Gotcha. What'd you hate about it? Was it the reserve aspect, or was it the MOS that you ended up not liking?
MLS.
The
Yeah,
MOS. Yeah.
I didn't like it at all. There was nothing appealing about it. It was just not what I thought it was going to be, right?
Gotcha.
And maybe had I done it active duty, it would have worked out different. I don't know, but I always kick myself in the beginning for not starting out active duty.
Me
But
too. Yep. I
uh,
did too.
I think everybody who goes through this says the same thing, but
Yeah.
you can't tell kids that. So
No, you couldn't tell me anything when I joined. I knew what
uh, he,
I was doing.
my recruiter was just like, "Are you sure that's what you want to do? Your ASVAB scores say that you can be in military intelligence, and I have this fat sign-on bonus for you." And blah blah blah. Blah. And I was like, "But how long is the school? The school's going to be like 12 weeks long." And that's
Yeah.
on top of basic training. I was like, "No, I don't want to be gone for that long." And they were like, he was just like, "Dude, I'm telling you, this is what you should do. You should listen." Like, no, 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 I want to be a cop. And I was just like, man, I kick myself every day for not
So it
listening
sounds
to
like I mean, it sounds like you had a good recruiter. You were just a 21-year-old young man who
19-year-old with a
19
stone
had the
head.
world figured out. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. No, I
yeah.
mean,
He was
so
cool.
go ahead. No, you're good.
He was a cool dude, and he was just like, I really think that you're messing up here, but hey, if this is what you want to do, this is what we'll sign you up for. And I didn't have a problem with drug tests or physical or anything like that, so it was an easy ad for him.
Yeah, yeah. So then you enlist as an MP. You go through basic. You go through AIT. How did you maintain that MOS throughout your career? Did you change him? I mean, I'm sure you had more than one by the end of it. Did talk to me a little bit about your next kind of step in the military?
Yeah, so I the reason I joined was to pay for college, right?
Right.
And at that time we weren't doing stuff on the computer. It was hey, come in and we'll fill this out. And the closest unit for MPs was 90 minutes away.
Okay.
Every time I wanted to have something, I would have to drive all the way there to go pick it up and then drive back. And I'm a broke college student. And
You're right.
after about the third trip, I was like, hey, listen, guys, if we can't get this figured out, I'm not coming back. And I U'd out. and and I was just like, I'm done. No, you guys can't. You promised me one thing and you delivered another, so I'm just
Yeah.
not gonna do it. U'd out, was out for about 2 years. The 9/11 happened, got back in.
Okay.
And just like the closest, I learned, and I was like, what's the closest unit to my house? They were like, there's a truck driving unit that is about, I don't know, about 12 blocks from you. And I was just like, okay, that's it.
That's the one.
That's what I'll do. And so I became a truck driver,
Gotcha.
and that was in 2001. Did the training 2002, reserve training. It was 1 week in a month, and 2 weeks
Okay.
in the summer. And they were still doing schools like that in the reserves. They don't really like that anymore, but
Right.
uh, went through. There's a sister unit that had instructors, that was about 30 minutes away.
Okay.
And they just came in and did the MOS stuff. And so
Gotcha.
that was cool how that worked out. Went through, got the MOS. Months later, deployed.
Gotcha.
Went to Iraq, and war happens over there.
Right. And that was in 03, and I'm pulling this off your LinkedIn. So it looks like 03. You were in Kuwait, Iraq. I mean, the invasion was in March of 03, right? So you're there as as that kicks off before.
I'm actually there so early that I don't qualify for the Iraqi Freedom Medal
Oh,
because
Jesus.
we got in country 3 days before the medal started.
Wow. Okay. Okay. So so talk to me a little bit about that experience. As a truck driver, and if you're in the military, I think you understand this, but I think for people outside the military, when you think of dangerous jobs in the Army, or Marines or what, truck driver isn't the one that pops into your head, but for people that have been in, that job at that time it was probably one of the more dangerous jobs on a day-to-day basis. Clearly, infantry and all of that has those moments of high intensity, and then it slows down a little. But truck, every time you roll out of that gate in a truck, I mean, with IEDs and whatnot. So as much as you're willing to or would like to, what was that time, especially when you were there? What was that time like for you?
It's stressful. We got there and we're waiting at the Kuwait-Iraq border, the night before the invasion happens, and we're just sitting there at the border, and there's a couple thousand trucks in line waiting to just go straight to Baghdad, and we're sitting here like not knowing what to expect, and we're rolling out, and the worst sandstorm in Iraq's history hits right in the middle of this
Wow.
convoy. Like the day that we were running up there, it just so happens that the worst sandstorm in history hits, and it's orange. You can't see anything. You can't even see like the front of your truck. That's how thick it was. Like, and we were just like looking over, the A drivers looking out the window to see, hey, are we still on the road? Like
Wow.
half the time there was not even a road. And then just out of the blue, it would clear up every once in a while. And you just see trucks rolled over and blowed up and all kinds of stuff. And you're like, dude, this is day one.
Yeah, right. It's already going like this.
Right. And so, but we didn't stop for probably 2 days. Like,
Wow.
not to sleep, not to rest, but we were rolling it like 5 miles an hour because you can't, like, we literally couldn't see anything. So we were just rolling at 5 miles an hour and just creeping all the way there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was a stressful time. Whenever we could hear tanks around us, we were like, okay, I can at least relax a little bit.
Right.
Like,
Right.
here with us, but it was just like, but you couldn't see him. It's just
You
like,
just heard it,
it's
heard
kind
it
of that.
rolling.
Yeah, and but it was really really stressful time. Lack of sleep, long hours, because you couldn't sleep if you were the A driver,
Yep.
and you got to have your windows rolled up. We were in 818s, which are Vietnam era fifth wheel or 5 tons with a fifth wheel,
Yep.
and they're stick shift, and the stick comes straight out of the engine, straight up to the floorboard. So there's a big hole in the floorboard, so the engine heat's coming up through there.
Oh, in
It was
Iraq, where it's already not the coolest of places.
right, and the windows had to be rolled up,
Yeah,
so you got all this heat coming up, and there's nowhere for it to go, right? And it got so hot that rounds were popping off in our vests.
really.
Yeah, so like it was that hot in the inside the trucks, and there's not you can't do anything to prepare for that.
Right.
There's no so other than the external, IEDs and stuff like that, it was really just a battle with, hey, am I gonna be able to like live through this just because I might fucking die from heat exhaustion?
Right.
Like
Right. No,
those are
I
the things.
mean, and so you touching on that, I think that's part of this is recruiting themed, and I think that is an overarching kind of trait that military people and personnel. So when I say that, of course, there's variables, and I'm saying military personnel, very broad strokes. There are those among us who don't adapt to the and take those traits, but I think that ability to overcome just discomfort, whether it's physical, whether it's mental, being able to see through all that, fight through all that, and find whatever it is in you that lets you push forward. I think that is a trait that translates so well into civilian leadership roles because let's take your circumstance for example. I mean, you're in a foreign country. How old were you at the time?
20.
20, so 20 years old in a foreign country, driving through a desert to go to war. There's heat, there's sand, there's all your gear, you're itching, you're hot, you're sweaty, all the, you know what I mean? And at 20 years old, you were forced to overcome that. There's no other option where, you know, I think a lot of times, and I'm going to make like a generational comment, but I think it happens. It's just a people thing, but there's a natural kind of inclination to go away from that. Like, you know, if I'm uncomfortable, if I'm hot, I'm going to go in the AC. If I'm whatever thirsty, I'm going to drink water. Well, the military, there's no out. You can't just, hey guys, I'm going to hang out. I'm going to stay back on this and you guys go do it. It's too hot for me. Like that doesn't exist in the military. So you get these young men, young women who just through sheer being forced to, they tap into something that I think translates so well. And you know, again, that's why people like yourself who spent so many years doing it can come into an organization that's struggling. I won't maybe failing, you know, where they may not get a contract renewed, and you're able to turn it around and turn it into something that is growing and is profitable. And but I just think it speaks volumes of that. So sorry, I derailed a little bit there, but so you're in Iraq. Do you guys go into Baghdad? Is that kind of the, obviously, I think that was the main point everyone was convening on at that time. But obviously there was stuff outside of there. But what did it look like? You know, where'd you end up?
So on our first load, when we were lined up, you know, we were loaded up with just water and MREs, right?
Okay.
And
Yeah.
it's like an entire company of water and MREs, you know, just going up.
Yeah.
And so it was just a bunch of trucks loaded with that, and we went up there, dropped off our load at a forward operating base, and then we start heading back. On the way back, where we stopped at a place called Cedar One.
Okay.
Um, Anybody who's over there, with early days, knew what Cedar One was. It was a giant dust bowl, and that was where we were at. That was where we were headquarters, and we were like, of all the places, this place is where we're gonna be at.
And so
And
then
so
you guys are just running back and forth. Is that what that was for your time there?
So yeah, so the first time we came back, we just came back, you know, deadhead or empty.
Yep.
Trailers. After that, you know, we go up there and coming back, we bring back stuff like blowed up vehicle or a shot down helicopter, and they would just throw it on the back of a flatbed and just tie it down, and it was like we take water and food up there and then bring back garbage basically.
Right. Right.
And that was what we were doing over and over and over again, and it was a lot.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine. You know, my 13 years, 13 and a half years, I got close to deploying and never deployed once. I was in logistics as well. I just wasn't in the cards for me. I don't know. My mom told me to stop begging for it for a while after a while because she's like, if it's meant to happen, it'll happen. Quit asking for it. But you know, I of course know a lot of the people I worked with in the National Guard were in that. You know, I was a little after you, so I didn't have many that were in that initial push. But you know, 05, 06, I got in 08, so 5, 6, 7. You know, a lot of my squad leaders and my platoon sergeants, they all, you know, come back and tell that same thing. You know, just we made it happen, and here was our job, and we just, you know, adapted and made it happen. And so yeah, I think it's a common experience that you hear. And you know, another common trait that I have found in the military, it's true for me, I think it's true for most of us, you know, is that there's always a leader that stands out in your mind, and is kind of who, whether you know it or not, you maybe you took some of what you saw from them and you adapted it into your leadership style. You know, for me, it was very early on, and I think he's a command sergeant major now on the active side, but Clifton Morehouse, still remember his name to this day. He imprinted whatever he imprinted on me, and he's just always been kind of that, what I looked up to as a military leader. What was there someone for you that you know, whether it was maybe not even a leader, was there a soldier you worked with, you know, a leader that left an impression on you as a soldier yourself?
So yeah, there was one positive role model that I had, but most of the stuff that I learned from the army was learning what not to do.
Yeah.
Honestly,
Okay. Yeah.
there's a lot of bad leaders.
Yes.
In many organizations, not just the army, right?
Right.
I think our most experience, our most invaluable experience is learning from those on what not to do. So that was a lot of self-reflection in the way that I treated people based on how my leaders had treated me in the past, right? And took a lot of self-reflection to say, hey, you know what? I really didn't like this.
Yeah.
What can we do to be different, I had one leader early on, and he was just like, he was a master sergeant. I was just E4 at the time, and he was like, hey, James. He called me by my first name.
Yeah.
He was like, hey, James, just listen. He was just like, as a leader, it's really not a hard job. He said, all you got to do is find out what's in the way for those people that work for you and get it out of the way. He was just like, and they'll do the rest.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and it really stuck with me. And then as I progressed through the military, and I learned servant leadership style, through the military, is when you go in and you're going to, what do they call it now, ALC, SLC, and MLC,
I think,
right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that's what they teach you, is like your servant leadership style and stuff like that. And a lot of the people, I'm on LinkedIn a lot, and I read a lot of the military guys that are on there. You shouldn't do this and you should do that, and they're like, oh, you shouldn't base your whole style on servant leadership, because that doesn't necessarily translate into the civilian numbers. It's like, I completely disagree. Like, every single thing about that style does translate. Yeah, it might be a little more expensive, but I think that when your corporate headquarters or something like that sees that it gets results, then they're willing to pay a little bit more to get that, and
right.
you treat them right, and it saves you money in the long run.
That's exactly the last part there is so true, and I hope that everyone that I work with as hiring managers sees this. No, but so I think, and for me, when I was always a why person. I always have been, and for better or for worse. I just, and that translated into my leadership style. I full transparency, good, bad, ugly. I just always found that being transparent with why we're doing what we're doing, and really painting the picture of that end goal and how our piece plays into getting there, and just being open with the soldiers that I led, that I always got the best results in those circumstances. And you mentioned the servant leadership and the treating people right. I also always found that being out there with them, wherever there was, whatever uncomfortable place we had to be in, I saw the leaders that would not be there, or they would be in their rack and texting for an update instead of coming out. We're going to get kicked out of here in 10 minutes. So, but I always found that they were the smoothest, most comfortable, missions that we ever ran, were the ones where, hey, here's what's going on, at full transparency. And again, whether it's good or bad, typically they would fall in and be like, okay, this is going to suck for everyone together at the same time. And then when we're done and we get back, we are all in the same place, and we joke about it and laugh about it, hopefully. But yeah,
Require we called it presence on the
yeah,
NCO. Yes.
yeah. So I mean, yeah, I mean, so the last piece of this, and I think this is, again, going back into the recruiting, I think it's very important. So you came out of the AGR world, which for those that don't know, it is full time within the National Guard. You're a soldier every day of the week, wearing the uniform to work. It's not the 1 week in a month, 2 weeks during the summer, although you do the weekends as well, when you're AGR. Well, so your transition was more in line with an active duty personnel's transition. You spent what, a decade in AGR?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're coming out of 10 years of active military service. What advice would you offer for both, or either, however you want to approach it, for military personnel that are hanging up their uniform for the last time and are now entering this world? Well, what's a piece of advice you would offer?
Do not blow off SFL tap.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Don't blow it off.
Yeah.
It's the most valuable resource you're going to have as you're leaving the military. And go to your appointments for medical. Go to
So
your medical appointment and close it out. Make sure everything's done. Do
yeah.
those two things. If nothing else gets done as you're leaving, do those two things.
Yeah. Yeah. So I had a job lined up before I left AGR. Again, I was in recruiting and retention, but I had a job lined up. So I did bypass SFL TAP. But I think that's great advice because at the end of the day, when when you're transitioning out, your leadership still expects you to to report and continue the organization's mission. They're not really concerned. Well, I guess I'll say most leaders. I guess there probably are leaders out there that have an understanding of the transition and are empathetic towards it and helpful. But I would say your average military leader isn't so concerned with that one soldier that's transitioning out. So there is an organization in place that sole focus is here's how you successfully do this. And they're not perfect because as you do, I spend time on LinkedIn and you see gripes about it and that, the instructors are kind of check the block and they're not, but I would say as a whole, the information set, and I participated in some of the like mock interviews that they do, but like that information they're giving you, you're not going to get from anyone else within the organization because that's not their mission at the end of the day. So I agree with you. I think, utilizing those resources and, my one little piece would be live on LinkedIn in those kind of last days, networking, finding people that work at organizations you want to work at that are similar to you in background and connecting with them and not generically connecting with them, but sending a message saying, hey, I'm transitioning, XYZ, and really connecting with those people. I think that building that network is huge, just like it is in the military. We may not realize it in the military, but we network all the time. You can get to a certain point where it's like, hey, I want to go to this unit. I know so-and-so is the first sergeant now. I'm going to see if they can get me in, a slot there. So no, I love it. Yeah. Utilizing those resources, specifically SFL TAP. And yeah, again, thank you for your time. I know you guys are extremely busy right now with school year starting back up, but no, again, James, thank you so much for your time and connecting and getting this set up. I appreciate it. And yeah, thank you.
All right. Thanks, Sarah. Have a good one.
Awesome. Take it easy.